Yeah, so both myself and Chrissy are co-directors of the film Undercurrents, and I'm the editor of Undercurrents. That was my role for the past decade or so. And yeah, myself and Chrissy met at a barbecue for the London Surf Club back in 2012. So we were landlocked surfers back then, speaking about, what is this crazy thing that we do, driving down sometimes 7 hours just to get in the water. We'd both just started surfing as well, learning. And yeah, why do we keep going for maybe one wave, if that, in these freezing cold waters? What is that? And my filming background, and Chrissy's a photographer as well, and we just bounced a few ideas around, and that's kind of where the idea came from.
Yeah, we're both co-directors, co-producers. So my background is photography, and I also previously, prior to that, had a career in youth and community work. So I was always sort of interested in sort of challenging issues around inequality and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting because my background isn't film, but I love storytelling and I love film, and I love to tell stories through my sort of stills photography and stuff like that. And when me and Bron met, we just like really sparked off each other, and it was just like a really like met this really shiny person, and pretty much straight off the bat we were like talking about like filmmaking and stuff, and it was just like really exciting. And I kind of feel like in the process of making the film, there's been times where one of us has been clearly leading or the other one, but there's also been times where we sort of really interchange. Like one of us will have an idea, and then because we were trying to hold together so many ideas, that might fall by the wayside, and then somebody else. And sometimes we were almost like together, in terms of, especially when we were sort of shooting, we would be really like connecting with each other. And yeah, and it's really interesting since we've made the film and finished the film, like sort of for me anyway, learning about in the industry where it's like one person is specifically this and one person is specifically that, and it's like we've sort of had to sort of share with people what that actually means to be sort of co-directors and to be sort of sharing sort of roles and stuff. And I kind of feel like there's been times when we've been making it where we've got into these flow like states, not always, but like there's been some real magic, hasn't it, Bron, when we've been really creatively connected.
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of serendipity as well in the film. So we talk about something, really wish it for it to happen, and because we're communicating with ourselves and loads of other people, that sort of came to us quite organically as well. Normally you wouldn't dare go into a long documentary unplanned, but a lot of it was, and I think that's what created a lot of the magic as well.
Yeah, and just also touching on that, we're both very much wanting to be very authentic and true in what we're sort of saying. And I kind of feel because we went down it in that way, like we would be meeting and building relationships with people, and we had themes and things that we wanted to discuss and explore, but we didn't want to be sort of controlling that as well. So I kind of feel like you do get that really feeling and sense of authenticity because we're not trying to shove in our agenda.
That feeling of just getting lost in that moment, which, as most people know now, is flow. But at the time, we didn't really know that because in 2012, it wasn't really a buzzword. Mindfulness was a bit of a buzzword, and that's kind of what we thought it was about. So we wanted to make a film about capturing that idea. The more women that we spoke to, the more we realized everybody was having this feeling no matter what level they were at. So I think that's kind of what we wanted to get across. Yeah, and in that journey, we discovered actually this is not mindfulness at all. This is something completely different. Mindfulness, you are quite focused on your moment that you're in, whereas with flow, you forget. There's this time expansion and nothing quite matters except what's in front of you. You're there, but you're not really there, which is quite difficult to capture. And that's, yeah, basically when we brought Tamara on board, who's a mindfulness expert. And then, of course, you came on board after that, introducing Blue Health. So, yeah, it sort of evolved down that route. For me was when I started surfing, I couldn't quite get over how much your mind played a part in the whole experience. Um, and if you went surfing and you're a bit angry inside or you're a bit upset with something, nothing works for you. And the importance of that self chatter, the positive affirmations, like if you walk towards the water and you say, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, how that actually changes your experience, really. So I think that for me and the whole surfing journey was a huge reason why personally I wanted to get involved with the film.
I wanted to be inspired by other women sort of surfing, so that was one thing. So I wanted to, and there wasn't really very many films that I was finding that were inspiring to me about women sort of surfing and doing what they love. They had a very particular approach. It was very sort of showing how amazing people were doing surfing, particularly men, and very adrenaline focused, lots of sort of intensive music. So there was that element. And also I kind of, like when me and Bron were talking, sort of thinking, well, why are we doing this crazy thing, like peg it down to like the south coast, like spend hours in a car, get there, the waves are shit or whatever, or we'll get in, but we'll have this moment, and it's magical and we just feel connected to everything around us. And like I wanted to know if other people had that experience too, and I also wanted to expand it in some way. So I wanted to create more of that in my life because it made me feel so happy and it was so healing. And then I wanted to share it with other people, but I didn't want to be like, oh, I'm learning all of this stuff and you should learn it too. So it wasn't, and we're not from that place. I don't think. I don't want to speak for you, Bron, or whatever, but we're not like trying to be like, oh, blah blah blah. But I kind of feel like when you find something really magical, that if you share it with others, that's quite a beautiful thing. And I love storytelling, I love it. And when I was speaking with Bron as well, like how she sort of talked about it, it was exciting, like what her perspective, it was like, oh, exciting.
Chrissy was really good at composition. So obviously from a photography background, it's quite refreshing because when you're in the edit, you're quite used to getting all the rushes immediately. So basically you're stuck in this whole magical little storyline where you've been given loads of stuff and you don't have a peripheral vision. So you don't have anything on the outside that's going, moving or disturbing you or whatnot. You've literally got whatever's in front of you to craft with, etc. So when you're sort of on shoot, it's quite refreshing to have someone to say, no, that'll really work quite well. Do you know what I mean? And I think, Chrissy brought a lot of that to the table with her photography. Also, probably being in the industry for so long as well, the TV industry, you can get bogged down with how things should be. And it was quite nice to just go and shoot with a friend as well and just have a good time with it and not worry about deadlines and what we had to come back with, etc. Because often after a day I would be like, oh, what are we doing here? We've got nothing, we don't have anything yet. And so yeah, it was just a really nice organic process to have that with someone.
I mean firstly, from a very sort of practical sort of space, like we're both visual people, but photography in stills is very different to moving, although there's a visual sort of synergy there, so for me, sort of talking with Bron and it helped me become more fluid in how I was visualizing things and trying to capture things, but also the emotive side, like Bron is so connected with that and she's really good at sort of bringing out emotions. And for me, like when I watch stuff, I want to be emoted, be moved by sort of stuff, and also you know, sort of talking about symbolism and stuff like that. So there's all these sorts of things that for me, it was really, that was the magic for me.
That's lots and lots of hours of storyboarding. There's lots of papers on the I mean, it's become quite a simple thing, but everything behind it is like, I mean, that was years of, oh no, that's not working, it's not working, it's not working, we have to change that. And the moment you pull a thread in one thing, the whole film just goes topsy-turvy. And you want it to feel like the ocean, you want it to feel like the soft flowing story. So each scene has to fit with the next, visually, aesthetically, you know, with the characters, what they're saying. So, I mean, and because of all the complex topics as well, on top of that, yeah, it's the playing on the feeling all the time. Yeah, even little things like, you know, like music beats in certain places and stuff. Just, but if you're editing a scene and you don't feel that, it's not working. Something's not quite there yet. So if you're editing a scene and you're crying, it's a really good sign.
But my own sort of personal journey in terms of sharing, allowing someone to not come into my space, but sharing a space with somebody for so long, that is so hard for me. You know, I feel so vulnerable doing that, and it's so hard, you know, to be vulnerable. And I'm, you know, like, and to, you know, if you're having a difficulty with something and being honest and, you know, all of those sorts of things, it's actually really challenging. And but I also feel like if we had just a professional relationship, it would be a very different experience. Sometimes in some ways easier, in some ways harder, you know.
So on shoot, I don't know if you remember Hurricane Brian, the sky was really red. That happened whilst we were in Jersey as well, whilst we were on shoot. And we knew it was happening, but we didn't really plan anything around it. But we woke up that morning and the whole sky was just completely red, and there was this massive ring around the sun, and it was just really ominous. And we went down to a boatyard, and Jersey's got massive, like a huge tidal range, 40 meters or so. And the tide was completely out, which meant all the boats were marooned. And it became the fear section in the film. But all the sailboat masts were ding, 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 in like the wind that was arriving. And then there were crows, and the water was slowly coming in. And as it was moving over the sand, it was bubbling up, and the atmosphere was red. So it was just like fear all around us, really. And I think that was a massive high for me, was walking around there and capturing all these little things and all the sounds and the bubbling, and just being really stuck in the moment like that, and really feeling how it was like that. And then editing that scene as well and trying to recreate that feeling of being there, that was a real high for me in the production phase. I think. And then of course releasing it, actually I didn't really enjoy watching it in the cinema for the first time. It was like very uncomfortable for me. But it was great afterwards to hear that people had enjoyed it. But yeah, because it's such an emotional journey as well. Because if it doesn't feel emotional on the screen, if it doesn't feel emotional here, it's not going to feel emotional there. So watching it is like watching your head playing out, basically. Yeah, I feel. When we got really bogged down with information, before really understanding what the film, where it was going and what it was about, and we sort of dropped it for 2 years. In hindsight, it was a really good thing that we did that, because we had the space to think about it. But yeah, I think a part of me was really sad that it was gone. Well, so we thought. But then it came back, which was great. We didn't understand the mindfulness flow thing, that hadn't gelled. Oh. Yeah, we hadn't met you yet either. Like, yeah. So
I was living over in Costa Rica, and I'd come back for 6 weeks, and I was sort of a bit discombobulated, and I was trying to sort of like be in the moment with everything, and I wasn't really taking care of myself. And so I just felt really ungrounded, and I wasn't able. There's a couple of times where I wasn't able to communicate with Bron, like what was stressing me out, and we had this really funny conversation whereby, like, because I get really bad hanger, and I was just like, I couldn't express myself, and I was just getting really agitated, and I wasn't recognizing that was going on. And then I think I just said, I just need some food, so we got some food. It doesn't sound like a big deal at all, but it's that's part of my personal journey in before sort of sharing a space with somebody and building that trust and stuff, and having to be vulnerable, and especially when it's a friend, it's like we're sort of mixing up doing a so-called work project, but it's a passion project, and there's a friendship there, and being brave enough to say, oh, actually I need this. And that was hard for me, because I was it was just hard for me. The high side, well, there's two things. One is the fact that because there's been some of those challenges for me personally in trying to sort of be authentic or being authentic or whatever, what I've gained is this really amazing, deep, trusting relationship with Bron. I kind of feel like we really, if there's something troubling, we will sort of connect with each other and talk about it, and it's not coming from a blame place either. It's like, I'm feeling like this and I'm just trying to work it out and whatever. And I don't know what it would have been like if there wasn't that friendship, like it would just be a different experience, I guess. And I'm really glad that although some people might think it's more complicated, I'm much happier at it being like that, because I just feel so much safer. And I just think it's so much deeper an experience. But also it's interesting for me, one of the things that I was really like, wow, this is amazing, was actually at our premiere, because I was sitting there and I was really emotional, because I was just like, I can't believe we made it. I can't believe we did it. And I don't know whether I could probably fully enjoy the actual watching of it, but I was just like, wow, we have followed our hearts. We've followed something that we love, and we've managed to do it. And I just had all these sort of like, all the challenges and all the things that we weren't quite sure about and whatever, and then seeing it, and then also seeing everyone watching it, and then them laughing at the bits we were expecting. And I was just like, oh, I couldn't look at Bonnie, because I was just like, oh, I'm going to cry. It's just like...
Very cool. It was a very emotional journey.
Yeah.
Because we'd shot the interviews, Natalie and Arlene, we had their life journey there already, obviously in sound bites that were in a million different places. But we knew that Natalie was, a marine activist, and she's got a massively open heart for the environment, and that's sort of where her focus has gone. We knew Arlene's journey and where she came from, and how deeply personal it was for her to be that, that woman who pioneered surfing, or one of them, and how that's affected her mentally. So we had their two endings, you could say. So we knew where they needed to be, but then because we knew it was a film about themes as well, we knew we needed to get there by the themes, if that makes sense. So then the question was, so how did surfing do that to them personally? What is it about that surfing experience that made A, Natalie so compassionate for the environment, and B, Arlene so like deeply compassionate, towards herself and her experience? And that was it, wasn't it, Chrissie? It was compassion. And we were like, oh, how did that happen? How did we do the sport, have a whale of a time, amazing, feel so wonderful inside, and then suddenly you either want to really start looking after yourself or you want to look after the environment? What is that bridge that sort of gets you there? And that's actually when we met you as well, when we were sort of on that journey, and we were starting to talk about blue health and blue mind, and that filled in a lot of gaps for us. And Tamara, the way she spoke about playfulness, and we were like, wow, it's really sort of, it's so true that if you're in the water and you tense and not so happy with the world and everything, that's exactly how you're going to be out there. Whereas when you're all playful and light and etc., you know, things are going to work in your favor, and by doing that you feel lighter, and so therefore you feel lighter to other people, you feel lighter to yourself, and that equals compassion. And we were on our surfing journey as well, so whilst this was all happening, this was happening to us as well. So we were sort of able to fill up the pepper pot within ourselves and the film at the same time, and that's kind of how it evolved. So yeah, we had an ending then, basically.
And also at the very beginning we had other women involved, and we sort of were talking about an idea of having sort of almost archetypes of women, you know, of different ages and backgrounds and stuff. So then we had these two female surfers who we'd got really good sort of relationships with, and that really, and also, you know, what with Bron saying, you know, about all the different themes that we were sort of trying to incorporate, we wanted it to be really simple as well. We wanted it to be really like accessible to sort of to us, let alone, you know, like for us to understand it, let alone, you know, other people as well, because sometimes it was just like, oh my god, you know, how are we going to create this journey? And as well, you know, like with Arlene, you know, we also didn't want to sort of have a neatly perfect ending of, well, now I'm going to live happily ever after, because as well, that's not what life's about. It's not like, oh, you've got this you do this and then that's happened. It's not that at all. It's like, okay, these are things that are going to come up. You don't know what's going to happen in your life, but there's always a choice in terms of how you deal with that and how you respond. But it's also important to be true to yourself in that moment, sort of thing. So yeah, that was important. We had a complete clear plan, honest.
Yeah. Yeah, we know what we're doing.
Best stuff happens through that sort of alchemy anyway, isn't it? But it's really beautiful.
I really like it to reach people who will really benefit from it, you know, and maybe people who wouldn't necessarily and not in a preachy way, but as in, you know, like somebody who wouldn't necessarily be interested in watching a surf film, but actually watches it and they remember like the joy that they had as a child sort of connecting to the ocean, and then they spend more time going into the ocean. And it's not like you know, anyone has to do that, but at all, people who don't necessarily have a really strong connection with the ocean to find the gifts of the sea through our film, and really sort of reconnect with that part of themselves, because, you know, we are all connected whether we sort of recognize it or not. So, you know, if there are people that want to collaborate with us in some way or whatever, they can always just reach out to us. But if there's a way in which we can make connections with other people and build relationships with other people, you know, like mirroring the things that we, you know, we've learned and still are learning from what we've done with our film, then that's sort of exciting.
I think we definitely want to connect with a few communities, and I think there's a few different communities that would benefit from watching. Maybe, you know, we've got the surfing community, which is obvious. There's a women empowerment theme in there as well, and there's also mental health, which is, you know, huge at the moment. And if it's not blue space, it's green space. It's, you know, whatever connects you, that's the space you need to put some time into, I think. And yeah, I think going back to the previous question, like what we want to get out of it, I think it would be nice for people to watch it and to just say, oh, I get that feeling too. You know, like I feel scared like that as well. You know, because I think that'll bring us together. Not so much, you know, I mean, obviously in the surfing community, but with anything really. I think that's a huge thing for mental health, is actually understanding what's going on in your head. And I think it's a quote that you say as well. It's one of my favorites, right at the end, where what you say, something about your head tells us stories. I love that. Like, and it's important to know that you don't actually have to listen to what it's telling you all the time. You know, you can challenge that, and then you say, like, and when you challenge those stories, you know, you find like a bigger part of yourself, or there's a lot of room for growth in there. So I think if we could connect with all those communities on all those levels, That would be great. And as Chrissie says, we could have authentic relationships then and get the film out in that way as well.
Instagram. We're just using a bit of YouTube as well. We're just starting that.